Hi everyone, it's me again, Richard here from Calvin Wazoo. Starting off with my squeaky voice like I always do. Seems like every time I say hi everyone, I got that little squeak in my voice. Anyway, it's another installment of Frank Zappa, one album at a time. And today I'm going to be talking about another great classic in the canon. And it's this one here, Burnt Weeny Sandwich. You know, in my video of Hot Rats, I said it was among a few select albums released by Zappa that I would give 6 stars to, and that there were a few others. This is one of them. It is a brilliant album, in my opinion. And of the very few albums that I would say, yeah, it's 6 stars instead of 5, I would identify this also as my favorite release in the entire canon. So it's definitely a number 1 for me and has been for a really, really long time. I have the others, that are in that elite group of releases, but they're not ranked. So any others, and I'll be mentioning them as we go along. I don't consider Hot Rats better than these others or any of these others better than Hot Rats. The only one that I have sitting at the top is this one. So I have an original here on the Bizarre label, and I also have a Zappa Records release of it. So, oh, tasty little sucker, huh? Looks like he's eating a bicycle tire. And then on the inside here, you get the various thought bubbles going on here. Some credits that don't quite clarify many things in terms of the personnel involved in the playing, and even the entry for this release in the big note will say in some parts that the piano is played either by Monk Gardner or Ian Underwood. I also, of course, have it on CD. I have a lot of the catalog, both on vinyl and on CD. I guess I just hadn't been showing the CDs in previous ones. It was released in February of 1970. And the source of the name comes from this snack that Frank would eat while he was working, particularly at home. And also, he shared this little delicacy with others. And basically the Burnt Weeny Sandwich is a Hebrew national hot dog sausage that he burns on the stove, and then he puts it on a slice of bread and adds some mustard to it, and then boom, you got a meal. That's the Burnt Weeny Sandwich. The name is really quite appropriate for the title of the album because of the way the album is structured. It begins and ends with a doo-wop tune. And then in the middle is some combinations of, jazz, fusion, and rock, and what Zappa called electric chamber music. Doo-wop songs are acting like the piece of bread, and then you've got the meat in the middle. The meat of the album is there, being held together as a sandwich, by the bread. And it's also, the meat of the album is a little bit on the burnt side. So it really is a very appropriate title, works really, really well. I used to view this album, this release, as sort of a collection of oddities. Didn't really think of it as being very cohesive. The songs are different pieces and things that came from different recording periods that were put together. So in that respect, yes, it is sort of a collection of oddities. However, over time, I have come to enjoy what I see now as a very smooth transition from piece to piece to piece. The connections are all very well thought out, so that while there may not necessarily be this, well, I'm going to take that back. I really do think there is a musical theme that is going through the album, pretty much held together by the two primary pieces, which is the theme from Burnt Weeny Sandwich and also from Holiday in Berlin. But it was an album, too, that I came to a little bit later, and later meaning probably around 1971 or 72, so a year or so after it was released. So I would have been maybe 13, 14 years old when I started listening to it. Other than Absolutely Free, which was my first hearing of that, I was 10 years old. I was at that time in the early 70s, junior high school, and of course, Fillmore East, Just Another Band from LA, 200 Motels. These were releases that were coming out and had that prurient theme that, interested the debased mind of a junior high school kid. But when I got this album and started listening to it, I was completely transported by the music. It was just absolutely incredible. And, for a while I did view the doo-wop songs, as a little bit, a little bit annoying, a little bit anachronistic, even though I really enjoyed them. WPLJ I liked much better than Valerie, but I did like the songs. They just kind of jarred me compared with what was going on throughout the rest of the album. And over time, I have really come to appreciate, again, as I said, the entire packaging of the music on this release. My parents upgraded their console stereo, and so I got the old console stereo and put that in my bedroom. And then I rigged, and because it had an output for other speakers, it had built-in speakers in it, but then it had an output where you could attach other speakers. But what I did is I fixed something up so that I could have headphones and listen to headphones, and I could listen to my music as loud as I want. And also at night, I often would listen to music on headphones falling asleep, or the radio too, because it had a good FM radio. And this was the days of good FM radio, not like the corporate BS that we have now with playlists that are just repetitive. Anyway, this album just really would transport me. I'm struggling for words. It took me on musical journeys of imagination, unlike anything else I had listened to. The other album at that time that came close to giving me that same experience while I was listening to it would have been King Crimson's debut in the Court of the Crimson King. This album holds a very special place in my musical heart, so to speak, which is why it is very much my favorite #1 album in Zappa's catalog to this day. So it also came with this poster that shows in its, this, big long thing. And then we've got this Gabby Fergie. She does the doo-wop, doo in WPLJ. And then there's, also, right, there's, two different sides of, the black and white images on here. I also have an original poster with the original release that I have on the Bizarre label. And it was released in February of 1970, and it was part of a flurry of releases in 1970. There were several albums that were released that year, and some of the material is coming from the Hot Rats sessions. So it starts off with WPLJ, which is the opening track, a doo-wop song that was originally done by the Four Deuces in 1955. And the interesting, I've always thought it was kind of a comical song, especially at the end where I believe it's Roy Estrada who is chattering away in Spanish. Apparently he's trying to talk somebody into buying him some white port or whatever. Anyway, I always kind of thought it was amusing, being 12, 13 years old, 14 years old. But apparently it really was a popular drink in the 50s for teenage kids. They would take white port and mix it with some lemon juice. And there were several other songs. Well, not several other. There were a couple other songs from that era that sang about this concoction. One of them was called Shake 'Em Up by the Feathers. And then also there was a song, White Port and Lemon Juice, by the Bel Airs. So these were during the 1950s. WPLJ was released in 1955. And, the name of the song, Shake 'Em Up by the Feathers, the lyrics in this song, allude to that process where you're taking the white port and some lemon juice, and then, you shake it up fine. You got a good wine, white port and lemon juice. So, it's just a really, really funny song. Then it goes into what is called Igor's Boogie, Phase 1, which is a very short piece. I think it's less than a minute. And it's an example of this electric chamber music that the Mothers were doing quite a bit of. Was also something that was not very well received. In fact, a lot of people, they would come to a Mothers concert expecting some rock and roll, and then they would start playing this style of music, these compositions, and the crowds reacted badly. Critics were negative, which, Zappa sort of grew bitter toward, because people were not opening their minds to the possibilities that, music could provide in them. They all wanted something they could tap their feet to, kind of thing. But anyway, after Igor's Boogie, it then goes into the Overture to Holiday in Berlin. Now, it's a really beautiful melody, and I'm going to talk a little more about the song later. but it just always struck me for, decades. This was a very happy, buoyant melody and composition. What's interesting is this overture is just about, under 2 minutes. And at the 1 minute mark, you hear something that sounds kind of like a baritone sax. It kind of also sounds like a cello, but in reality, it's this intentionally out of tune string bass. And I had no idea for years. I mean, I really thought that, I think for the most part, I thought it was a bari sax. And then later I kind of thought, oh yeah, it kind of sounds like a cello. You can hear, that they're playing a string. No, this is an out of tune string bass. From there, we go into the theme from Burnt Weeny Sandwich, which was a movie that Frank made called Burnt Weeny Sandwich. It begins with some of this maybe electric chamber music, or more like the musique concrète. And then gradually fading in is Frank doing this guitar solo that is filled with delicious fuzz and wah-wah. It is it's really, really, really great. And and as he's continuing to play in this solo, then the other more percussive instruments start, building up. And the piano seems to be, random, almost like I'm wondering if he's just taking his hand and strumming them across the strings inside the piano, but just a lot of sweeping random gestures. And then there's all these other percussive instruments, wood blocks and triangles and other things that are going on throughout the song. Again, while the guitar solo is kind of fading in and out in that. It's such an engrossing song. And then this goes into, as it fades out into Igor's Boogie Phase 2, which I always loved. It's a pretty simple, short tune with some horns and woodwind being played, flugelhorn and clarinet, and bicycle horns. They're little honking bicycle horns that are going on at the same time. This is, to me, brilliant and so light and very fresh. Then we come to Holiday in Berlin, Full Blown. So, as I mentioned earlier, Holiday in Berlin really strikes me as a very upbeat, beautiful, I can even sort of fantasize. I did, as a kid, I would fantasize in my head about being in Berlin on holiday and seeing the sights of this wonderful German city. But the song actually commemorates a rather miserable experience Frank had in Berlin. Now, I mentioned, this is the back cover to Mother Mania. Well, this is the show. Now, I haven't read everything here, but Die Spielsachen sind alle kaputt is the headline with the story in Der Abend, and it's from 17th of October, 1968. And the show in question was the 16th of October, 1968, at the Sportpalast in Berlin. So here's the miserable experience. I'm going to be reading the entry about it from the big note. I highly recommend this book. So the title of this piece and the lyrics, heard in later performances, okay, so this is purely instrumental on Burnt Weeny Sandwich, referred to an incident that occurred at the Sport Palace in Berlin, Germany on October 16, 1968. At the sound check, Frank Zappa was approached by members of the SDS, which is the Sozialistischer Deutscher Studentenbund, not affiliated with the Students for a Democratic Society in the U.S. FC explains, I was later told that these were not any of the official SDS student leaders, but they happened to be young members of some very radical part of this organization that were trying to make a reputation for themselves as leaders. What they planned to do was go to the Allied Command Center and burn it down. And they asked me to invite all members of the audience to go along with them and help them commit this bizarre atrocity. And I said, no, I don't think that is good mental health, and I won't help you. Well, by the time the show started that night, they were out in the crowd with some air horns and about 20 agitators. And the minute we started playing, they got up and started marching around and shouting Ho Chi Minh and blowing these horns and pretending that they were having a revolution. And the next thing I knew, they started throwing cucumbers and tomatoes and eggs and firecrackers and just making a mess of everything. Well, at the intermission time, or after the intermission, Frank says he gave them a speech for about 15 minutes, wherein I discussed the possibility that they were acting more like Americans than I'd ever seen, and that pissed them off. And they are out there yelling, revolution, revolution, and I'm saying, you people need evolution, not revolution. They said, no, take it back, you're the mothers of reaction. And I told them they were fucked. And they understood English. So I told them whether they liked it or not, we were going to continue to play the second half of the program. So gradually they shut up and they sat down. The only thing that happened during the second hour was one cherry bomb on stage. But toward the end of the show, they figured this is their last chance to get the audience to go with them. So the student leader leaps onto the stage and grabs the microphone and starts babbling away in German. So in order to keep him from doing what he was going to do, I gave Don Preston instructions to put our electric organ through a fuzz tone and put both arms on the keyboard. You know what that sounds like. And that's an ugly fucking sound. And meanwhile, our road crew, such as it was carrying instruments off the stage one at a time. I made my guitar feedback, and it's just me and Preston making ugly noises, and this guy going like screaming. He's pantomiming, screaming. And at the end, we were both unplugged our stuff and walked off and just left him there babbling. That was his holiday in Berlin. So even though I have and continue to still view this music as very beautiful and light and happy, there was this incident that happened while they were at the Sport Palace in Berlin in 1968 that brought about this song. It then goes into ABC, which is AYBE, one word, and then CSEA, but ABC. And it starts off with this beautiful piano, which Ian Underwood said that Frank had scribbled out some notes for him to get started, and then he just basically, Underwood said that he just improvised from there. And so you have this piano and harpsichord going on, and Frank is playing acoustic and electric guitar. And that's just these instruments, and none of the other mothers are involved in the song. And it is such a again, beautiful, beautiful tune. And then it gradually fades in the end to where he's just, Ian Underwood tinkling on the high note keys and then hitting one bottom note and just barely, it's not, I don't think they're doing any manipulation with, the volume of the recording. It's just Ian Underwood just lightly tapping on the keys, getting this beautiful, soft, fading close. Just, I would listen to that and just it would kind of put me to sleep. It was so soothing, not boring at all, because I would be listening to it all the way to the end every time, especially with, my headphones on. Side 2 opens up with a major piece, The Little House I Used to Live In, which is broken into 4 parts. The first part is the piano. Again, it opens up with some piano, and then there's also a little bit of electric chamber orchestra. Then there's a second part in which the guitar, Frank and his guitar come in, and there's some guitar solo. There's a third section which introduces Sugarcane Harris doing an electric violin solo. This portion is from the Hot Rat session. It was recorded during the Hot Rat session. And then it ends with a live performance. Fifth section, this last section that I'm talking about, was recorded live at the Royal Albert Hall. There are some other sections in between there. Again, some more music concrete in the electric chamber music. But the applause at the end of the song, they're also from the Royal Albert Hall, but it's from they're applause from a different song. And then we've got this other, if you've listened to this, at the end of the song, there's somebody yelling out in the audience, and Frank is addressing them as they're screaming at him. And you can actually also faintly hear this part in there where someone with a British accent is saying, "Oh, sit down, let's go sit down now." All right, what happened was this young teenager, about maybe 14 years old, jumped up on stage. And some bobbies were present, and they escorted the kid off the stage without any real incident, which Frank was very grateful for. But that's what prompted all this screaming from the back of the hall, where this guy is yelling, "Get those uniforms off there," blah, 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 just reacting, negatively to the police, which, as I said, Frank appreciated the police coming in and getting the kid off the stage. But that's what prompted the heckler, and then that's what prompted Frank to say back, to him, "Hey, everybody here is wearing a uniform, and don't kid yourself." And then the guy is screaming, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, "Stop it, you'll hurt your throat." And they did go on to play Brown Shoes Don't Make It following that. But of course, the album then closes with the other piece of bread, the other doo-wop song, Valerie, which was originally done by the Starlights in 1960. So there you have it. That's Burnt Weeny Sandwich. Clearly my favorite release in the Zappa canon. The only one that I will definitely say, is at the top. There are several others, including Hot Rats, that I consider to be the cream of his recordings. But this one is at the pinnacle. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video. I would really like that. I would also like to point out that this may not sound like a big deal to you guys, but I've got 50 followers now. And that's pretty cool to me because, when I started this channel, of course, many of my original followers are friends and family who, click the button to follow my channel, but basically who never watch it. But now I know I am getting people who are watching the channel, subscribing to it. I appreciate your loyalty, and I hope to see you come back. And please remember always to enjoy your music.